Oh, listen to that jazz. Love it. Two things we do best in the United States of America: jazz music and manufacture killing machines.
And bourbon.
Yeah. No, I would say when I used to drink, I probably preferred Scotch over bourbon, but I liked them both. Maybe both a little too much.
Not with cigars. I prefer bourbon, and I'm from England, so
Bourbon's probably easier to pair. Yes.
And there we go. Welcome, one and all. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. It is time for Light 'em Up. It's Wednesday, time for the Light 'em Up Lounge. And today, in due time for the holiday season and in appropriate style, we have another banger of a show for you all. And I am delighted to welcome a gentleman to the show today. We've been waiting for him to be our guest for quite some time. One of the most accomplished cigar retailers in the United States, with a most interesting and inspiring history and story and journey into the world of premium cigars. As always, if you have questions, when you're joining us over on the Facebook live stream, please make sure to put your questions underneath the stream into the comments. I'll happily forward them to our dear guest here at the lounge. For all of you here via Zoom, friends and regulars, you know the spiel. I'm looking forward to your questions and your thoughts. For Mr. J.R. Davis of Blue Smoke of Dallas. Mr. Davis, it's a pleasure and honor. It's a privilege to have you with us, and thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here today.
Thank you. Likewise, I feel very honored to be here. I'm very excited to let you guys ask questions and fellowship. I love Europe. I wish I could afford it more, but with a wife and two children, it's expensive to get there. But Europe holds a very near and dear place in my life. We'll get to that later. But thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Well, first of all, your experience in law and in the financial industry shaped your early career, from what I understand. I'm curious as to how did that impact the way that you now work in the cigar industry and in cigar retail in particular, but also how has it changed and influenced the way that you look at cigars in general?
Well, I did not, unlike a lot of people in the industry, I did not grow up in the industry. I did not grow up smoking. I was a typical American growing up in the 60s and 70s, where my parents smoked cigarettes, usually with the windows shut with no air conditioning on in the car. And I never thought I would smoke anything. And I was quite literally on a golf course, and someone had suggested that we smoke a cigar. And my response was, why not? I turned 40 this year. I tried oysters for the first time and liked them. I'll try a cigar. And I just started smoking everything. But in answer to your question, I think one of the advantages of going to law school is it teaches you a way to think and to make decisions and how to categorize things from a non-emotional standpoint. So when I knew that I wanted to open up a cigar store, I've just approached it that way. And, having been in financial planning, I was basically, you're a trusted advisor and all that fancy lingo, but, you eat what you kill. And you can't control how much people invest with you. But what you can control is what we call activity. If you talk to 60 of your clients a day and always focus on trying to do the right thing for them, a lot of times that is not doing anything with their portfolio. It's just reviewing it, going over why they're doing what they're doing. And then when the opportunity presents itself where there's a need for a client, you let them know the risks, you let them know the pluses and minuses, and then you make a recommendation. And eventually, if you do things right and ethically, I believe sales will come. And they did. We approach our cigar business the same way. I've had other cigar retailers criticize me that they will not carry a cigar that's less than $10. And that they encourage their employees to always recommend where there's the greatest margin, this or that. And I just don't subscribe to that. My two best-selling brands are Arturo Fuente and Padron. And those cigars have the lowest margins in the cigar industry in the United States. If a client is a fit for a Hemingway signature, and they're not a fit for a cigar that has triple margin, you're going to recommend what makes sense for them. Because if they are comfortable with you and comfortable with a recommendation, they will come back. And as I like to tell my clients, I don't want your business today. I want your business and referrals for the rest of your smoking career, whether that's this cigar, because I recommended you a bad one, or maybe the rest of your life. And I want you to feel like if you come in and ask me for something, that I'm going to recommend what fits for you. Now, I will ask if there are price things you want to do. Do you want to be nothing above $15 or nothing below $5? We'll do that. But I'm going to try to recommend what I think is the best for you, because that's what was done for me as a young cigar smoker.
I think that's really the key, and what always struck me in the most positive way when hearing about your story, reading about your background, is that first and foremost, you were a consumer that experienced cigar retail in, I would assume, different ways. So hopefully most of them wonderful and memorable. And that sort of inspired you to go out on your own and create that very same experience for other people. And that's a very different approach to coming into the industry because you think you can make a quick buck, or because you just treat it as sort of a hobby. And I think that the mindset is truly what sets it apart and gives you the foundation and that solid background for wonderful experiences to be translated to your customers.
Well, thank you. When I first started smoking cigars, I bought a lot of Cuban cigars in the United States. I smoked many that were counterfeit, and I finally figured out how to get some real ones. But I really wanted to investigate the free world or new world cigars, whatever the proper term is. And I walked into a cigar shop. Jose knows it very well. It's called City Cigars. And I told the guy what I had smoked. And I described it as, well, it's called the Churchill, and it comes in this blue tube, which now I laugh about that because I thought Churchill was the name of the brand. So he had it in his humidor, and he gave it to me to smoke. And then after that, whenever I'd come in, he would recommend a couple of things. And then he kind of turned me over to his customers. Every time I'd come in, I would say, okay, guys, what am I smoking today? And over a 9-month period, I smoked everything in that humidor. Mm-hmm. And to me, a very proud moment was they finally would let me smoke the Hoy de Nicaragua Antaño in 1970. They said, this is graduation. They said, we're going to wait to have you smoke the cigar. And that was the last one I smoked. And they said, okay, now you've smoked everything. Now you're allowed to choose. So literally, I didn't get to choose what I smoked the first 9 or 10 months.
When looking back at those early experiences of yours, and then the current state of the industry and where cigar retail is today, how do you feel about the evolution during that time? And also, I mean, when we look at the bigger picture, things have dramatically changed over the last years, with the digital transformation being the big disruptor of most industries that are out there. And that it has obviously affected the cigar industry as well. But from your experience and perspective, that evolution from you being a consumer in the first place, an avid cigar lover, and where we are right now, what would you say are the main evolutions and the main changes that you have seen over the span of those years?
I would say that on a superficial level, I need to unplug my phone. I apologize.
All good.
They just can't call us for a couple hours. Join us on the live stream. I think superficially, a lot of things have changed. There's a lot more when it comes to buying cigars online. There are very large groups that get together, and particularly since COVID, they'll get together and they'll smoke in lounges. I mean, just this weekend, I wasn't there, but at the Ybor City Cigar Festival, there were people that were part of the Zoom lounges there that got together and they had dinner and they got to meet each other in the flesh for the first time. I think that's changed. I also think that there's been a a lot of different, and Jose's can speak more to this than I can, but there's been an introduction of a lot more wrappers and innovation in the cigar industry. But all that being said, I don't think anything's changed in the cigar industry from my perspective. It's about relationships. Most of the clients that I have either walk in the door or they call me. And I travel and I talk with people wherever I go. And I have clients all over the United States, and I ship to a lot of them. And it's not because I sat down one day and said, I'm going to have a shipping business. I hate shipping cigars. It just, you get to know people, and people buy things from people they trust in any industry. And whether you are running Cigars International and it's a complete catalog, or you're running a mom and pop shop anywhere in the world and you only sell to whoever walks in, and anything in between that, it's all about relationships. Do people trust you? And and do they feel comfortable? I mean, there's 60 some cigar shops in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Dallas, Fort Worth is big. It's about 6-7 million people. But people go to different shops for different reasons. There are cigar shops where there are no televisions. There are cigar shops where there's a bar. There are cigar shops where there's food. There's cigar shops where it's all sports all the time. And there's cigar shops where it's 24 hours a day. And I think it comes down to what you're comfortable with, what you're looking for. I know for me, when I first started smoking, there was a cigar shop I went to on a regular basis right around lunchtime. That was a break for the day. But then there was another cigar shop I went to on Friday nights because I like to play poker there. And then there was another cigar shop that I went to on Saturday nights because they knew how to party. So I think that that's still the same. People will choose a cigar shop that fits their identity. Now that's because I'm spoiled. Now, if you're living in Montana or Wyoming or Iowa or parts of Europe where you don't really have access to a local cigar shop, I think your experience is different, and it's hard for me to speak to that. But I can just say if you're blessed to be in an area like Dallas or Atlanta or New York City, that there are places you can go and smoke, then that you're going to choose the places that are comfortable for you.
I couldn't agree more. My own background is in hospitality, the wine and spirit industry, and ultimately it all comes down to hosting. And by hospitality, I truly mean treating other people well and providing them with an experience, not because it's a transactional thing, but because you want them to have a wonderful moment, a meaningful experience, and great memories. And it's a caring and giving act, at least in my humble opinion. It's understanding yourself as a humble servant, putting other people first, and making their experience and their happiness your greatest ambition and aspiration. And I think, like, for a cigar retailer and everything that you just described, it's the very same, where it is also a means of hospitality and conveying that service to the people that walk through the front door. How do you think about that?
I think that's very important. It's important that to not only be hospitable, but to understand what a person needs. Sometimes people come in and they want to talk to you about their life story for the next 2 hours. Other times they don't want to be bothered. I can think of 2 examples when I was traveling. One time my wife and I were in London. It was for our anniversary, and I couldn't find a place to smoke. And that was right after they had passed a lot of the bans, and there weren't a lot of places to smoke. So I went to a different hotel where I was not staying. And I'm like, look, where do I go? I said, I can go to Fox and I can smoke and test a cigar, but where can I go and smoke? He goes, go to the Lanesboro, or the Lanesboro, I don't know how it's pronounced. And we went there, and the cigars were very expensive, but the service was impeccable. My wife, who doesn't normally like to smoke cigars, and I went there, and I had a magnificent time. I smoked a 60-year-old cigar. It was for our 20th wedding anniversary. And it was a night that I'll never forget. It was an outside cigar bar that they put up, sort of like, I call it Visqueen. It's outside, but they make it feel like you're inside. But more importantly, I mean, they served your cigar on a silver platter. The waiter, she had white gloves on, and she cut the cigar for you and lit it. And the whole experience, it's no question in my mind that next time I'm in London, I will go there and smoke a cigar. even though they may not have the most affordable cigars, the service was perfect. The cigars are well humidified. It was perfect. On the flip side, a few years later, I was in New York City, and I went to all of the famous places in New York City, and I just wanted to go someplace different. And I went to a small cigar shop. I think it was off of 2nd Street. It was near Battery Park. And I walked in, and there's this girl who has this huge ring in her nose, and her hair is purple. And there's 2 benches on the wall that are about 6 feet each. And there's no humidor. There's a little standalone humidor that has 5 cigars in it. There was a cigar that Rocky Patel had made for them. There was an Oliva V and 3 cigars that I'd never seen before in my life. That was the best 3.5 hours I'd had in New York City smoking a cigar, because it was a neighborhood cigar place. People would walk in, they'd hang out for 20 or 40 minutes. There was a liquor store a couple blocks down. You could bring in a bottle, and we just hung out and had the best time. And I don't mean that as a slight against Club Macanudo or Cigar Inn or the Townhouse. That was the most fun I'd ever had in New York. And I think it was about the people, it was about the fellowship. And although the young lady who was working at the counter may not have been, a certified tobacconist or whatever, and she only had 5 cigars, she made you feel comfortable. And it was a great time. And I think it was called the Velvet Lounge or something. I don't know, but that was a number of years ago. But to me, that's the epitome. You don't have to have the selection of the Lansborough. It's just, as long as you're inviting, you're warm, you're hosting, like you said. I think that is so key. To quote Jose, who's on with us, we all know that the one thing that will screw up a cigar is sitting next to somebody who is, I don't know if I can say that word, but this is the opposite.
Whatever you want.
He says one best way to ruin a cigar is sitting next to an asshole. But on the flip side, if you're sitting next to somebody who's friendly and personable, doesn't matter if they're worth $2 billion or if they're worth 20 cents. If you can have a good time sharing with each other and enjoying it over the leaf, maybe with a cocktail as well, fantastic. And you can experience that almost anywhere in the world.
It sounds all so easy. And these are human principles. These are core values that we would hope most people carry in their heart. Yet it feels so difficult. And I brought up the analogy of hospitality in the bar industry, or being a restaurateur. It sounds easy in the first place, but then we all know how hard it is to implement and make those values truly lived and perceivable for other people. When you think about your ideal retail experience, what has to be in there? What should be part, and how do you get there? Like, where do you start? Is it about the concept of the place, that everything sort of has to come together and it needs to be a holistic concept and design? Is it just about the people, the training of the staff? What are those core elements that you're looking for with the perfect cigar retail space?
Well, I think you have to figure out what works for you. Everyone has a mousetrap. And what I mean by that is the successful retailers I can think of here in the Dallas area, they beat to their own drum. You can go to the Underground Cigar Lounge in Fort Worth, and it has a very certain feel and vibe to it. You can go to Renegade Cigar Lounge, a very different vibe and feel. And it ultimately comes down to, are you making people comfortable? Are you giving them choices? You don't have to, and you can't carry every cigar that's out there. I mean, yes, I do think it's important to have a good inventory, a good selection, fair prices, things are properly humidified, and take care of people. But there's a lot of different ways to do that. And I think as long as you make people feel comfortable, feel that make them feel important, and you let them relax, that's great. Because unfortunately, to quote Jose again, there are a lot of retailers that don't do that. You'll walk into a cigar store and it's not humidified, or they're very unfriendly, or the prices are ridiculous, and you can tell that they're in it to make money. Customers can pick up on that. And if they have a choice, and sometimes they don't have a choice, but if they have a choice, they're going to migrate to where they're comfortable. I mean, I'm tired of hearing brick and mortar retailers, particularly in the United States, complain about online retailers. The reason customers go to online retailers is either there's no one that they've developed a relationship with, or the people that they have been getting cigars from don't treat them right. Mm-hmm. I know of a customer who I don't know, but a fellow retailer of mine does. He bought a very, very nice Opus X humidor from LA Blue. That's a very expensive item. It's about $10,000. And the humidor was damaged. The retailer has still not made that right for him 3 weeks later. And there's nothing wrong with the Arturo Fuente cigars. There's nothing wrong with LA Blue. The problem is the retailer doesn't want to give the guy's money back because he took one of the cigars and gave it to a friend. To me, that is what guarantees you'll never have that customer again, particularly somebody who's going to spend that kind of money with you. But even if somebody spends $5 on a cigar and they start smoking it and they're like, there's something wrong with this cigar, just replace the cigar. It's not that hard. So unfortunately, I would say that 60 to 70% of retailers in the United States don't know what they're doing. They don't care about what they're doing. And I think it makes it harder on everybody, because if someone walks in, if I had walked into my first shop and I was treated like that, I may have stopped smoking and said, well, why am I going to do this? And in fact, there were shops that I went to where it's like every time I went, all I could smell was mold and the cigars didn't taste right. Well, thank God I found places where the cigars were properly humidified, where I was treated well, and it made me want to do that for other people.
Now, the question then becomes, why is that? And why does it seem like we all cherish and champion the brick and mortar, the traditional family-owned businesses and these old school cigar retailers to be the backbone of the industry and what we all rely on? Yet, as you mentioned, there's very few who get it right.
You know, some people deserve to be put out of business. I think it comes down to whatever your industry is, you have to care about people, or at least give them the illusion that you care about them. I would hope that you do genuinely care about them. Those people will typically go out of business if you don't take care of your customers. You know, whether it's an airline or it's a restaurant or what have you. I'll give you an example. One of the best restaurants we have in Dallas, and I won't mention the name because I might invite Jose there next time he's in town. The last 2 times I've went, they messed up my food. I got a steak and it was wrong and it was cold and they screwed up everything. But the way they handled it when they made the mistake, I would go there in a heartbeat, because they were willing to fix it. I mean, obviously everybody wants things to be perfect. You know, when I used to travel a lot, before I owned a cigar store and I had a lot of money, I would go on a cruise 3 or 4 times a year, and I would go to Royal Caribbean, and Royal Caribbean is far from perfect. But the reason I chose Royal Caribbean over their competitors is whenever something went sideways, they did their best to take care of it, and they were gracious about it. Not everything's gonna, if you're gonna go 7 days at sea on a cruise, inevitably something will go wrong. You'll be sleeping above a bar and not realize that you have small children, or you'll get some bad food, or you'll get some bad service, or something gets messed up on your bill. That's going to happen. And the reason that I chose them as a consumer was that whenever there was an issue, they would deal with it. I remember going on another one through the Panama Canal. My brother really wanted to go. It was a different company, and it was much nicer. The food was better, the service was better, but everybody was so unfriendly. And when the inevitable problems arose, their attitude was, oh, well, and I will never use that cruise line again. And I think it's the same thing with cigars. You're going to run into people who their only focus is on making money, or their focus is upon them instead of you. And it can't be. When you own a cigar store, in a lot of ways, you're like a bartender. It's kind of like the show Cheers.
Absolutely.
If somebody comes in and they're going through something, you've got to have the time and the willingness to fellowship and be with them, but also understand your place, that you're the proprietor. You know, you're not another customer. And one of the things that we do is a customer comes in, I don't just talk to them, I introduce them to the other people, and I'll try to point out commonalities. Hey, this guy, he works in an appliance warehouse place down the street, and you mentioned such and such, and you know, I'll get them talking, and I'm still part of the conversation. But I want my members to welcome that person, because there's nothing worse or more uncomfortable than coming to a cigar store, and if you're from out of town and you don't know anyone, and it become very uncomfortable. But you've got guys there who can mention, hey, this is a good place to go buy a bottle of whiskey, or this is a good place to go to dinner. This is a good place if you want to hear live music. And that's the way it should be. You can't be the one and all for that customer.
Wonderful words and great points that you mentioned. I feel like with some of the companies that you brought up, and the prime examples, the best companies out there that somehow get it right with customer service and hospitality have a very particular culture. And I think that the same is true for the best cigar retailers. Now, if it's a small shop or lounge and you can take care of everything yourself, that's one thing. But as soon as you have to bring on board employees that convey the very same experience, it's about creating that culture and making sure that you have the right people and you give them the right tools. How do you create that particular culture and make sure that you either hire the right people or give them all the necessary means in order to bring them to the level of where you want them to be?
You have to constantly coach your people. I mean, I only have 3 employees besides myself, and I find it's a lot of work. I'll see something that they handle that I don't agree with. I won't embarrass them in front of the customer. I'll take them to the humidor, or I'll talk to them later after the shift's over and say, hey, this is why we do what we do. This is why you want to recommend this. He asked for a really mild, smooth, creamy cigar, and you recommended a Padron. I'm like, why would you do that? Oh, well, Padron tastes creamy and smooth to me. Okay. Well, then I feel like I need to do more education. And it does come to building a culture. I mean, for example, very different from our store, look at Jeff Warshowitz in Corona. I've been to a number of Jeff stores, and a lot of times, like if I'm in Tampa, Jeff may be down at the Orlando store, and Jeff's not there. But there's a culture there because I always feel comfortable when I come into a store. So if a customer says to me, hey, I'm going to be going to Orlando this week, I will say without hesitating, hey, these are some small shops you can try, but definitely try Corona. It's great. Just because they're a larger operation. Same thing with Smoke Inn. I remember I was down for the Great Smoke a number of years ago, and I wanted to go to a cigar shop, and somebody said, well, go check out Smoke Inn. I think it's in Margate. And I remember they had just phenomenal customer service. And honestly, when I went to the store, they didn't have necessarily the cigars I was looking for. I still hung out there for 5 hours and had a great time because the manager was there. This is a Sunday. So typically on Sunday, the big manager's not working, the owner's not there. And you can tell a lot about a store. And my brother and I, we had such a great time. They were so friendly. We enjoyed ourselves. We watched some football. We drank some beer, sat outside. And that's a credit to the culture that Abe has built. And it's the same with, there's a reason why these people are successful. These people started with one store and they built it up. But I have to be honest, as a guy who owns one store, it's a little intimidating to think, well, geez, how could I move that culture to 10 stores? It seems overwhelming to me, but I'm sure at one point it seemed overwhelming to them. But I do think that's important, is you have to develop a culture. You have to continually coach. So for example, we had a customer today who he travels to Europe. He works with basketball players, and he really wanted to get a deal on a box of cigars. So I talked with my manager. I said, well, let's look at, his budget, and let's look at maybe some things that aren't moving as well, and we can give him a little bit better discount. Well, my manager made a mistake and sold him what I thought were the wrong cigars. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, I said, this is my fault. I said, I didn't properly communicate to you what we were trying to achieve. So the customer's happy, but now we've made this expectation as mine that he can always get a discount off this particular cigar. And I said, well, next time he comes in, I'll just let him know that, a small mistake was made, but that's a mistake in his favor, kind of like a monopoly. And it's hard to find good people. And the last thing you want to do is beat somebody up because they made a mistake. I mean, that's how my wife treats me. When I screw something up, she didn't throw me out of the house. She lets me know in a very direct way that, hey, she didn't appreciate the way I did this, and this is how she'd like done in the future. I want to press the same courtesy onto my employees. They're trying to do the best they can. You always have to assume that people are trying to do the right thing for the right reason. And if they're not, well, then maybe you need to replace that person in your organization. But I really try to believe that when we hire somebody, that they're going to be a long-term fit.
I think most people would probably say that one of the biggest challenges right now in the cigar industry is getting enough cigars. Whilst what you just said, I believe, is true for most industries. the real issue is getting the right people. What are the specific qualities and characteristics that you're looking for when hiring people for Blue Smoke of Dallas?
Can they think on their feet, and are they self-motivated? Because at our store, I mean, unless I'm there to help out, which that happens a lot, is they're going to be there by themselves. We don't have 2 or 3 people working at a time. So are they able to make customers feel comfortable? Are they able to enter items into the computer? Are they able to accept shipments? And there are certain things I let certain employees do that I don't let other employees do. Particularly when a new product comes in, my general manager, he has a lot of input on where we're going to put the cigars in the humidor, but maybe my shift manager does not. And you have to have people that, they can handle doing $4,000 worth of business in 3 hours. Or if we do $40 in business and it's really bad weather and it's a slow night, are they going to make sure to check the humidity levels on things, make sure the cigars are properly faced, do the pricing they need to, do the cleaning they need to? And that requires the ability to self-start. And you can't pay people $80,000 a year to work in a cigar store, just as you go out of business. So I think that's the biggest challenge. So you try to look for people that you can train them, but you don't want to have to hold their hand. And everyone's got their strengths and weaknesses. But the goal when you hire somebody is that they're going to be there until something better opens up for them. And then at that point, you don't hold people back if they have a better opportunity, but you hope they be there long term.
When you walk into a retail store yourself or into a cigar lounge, and you mentioned some of the international experiences that you had and your experiences in New York City, what are the key questions that you would like to be asked when you go in order to be led on a journey of discovery with cigars?
Well, the first thing is I like to be greeted, which it's shocking how many stores don't do that. And that's the first thing we teach our employees. When someone walks in the door, you greet them. If you know their name, say their name, ask them how things are going, how can you help them today, and make them feel comfortable. Particularly if it's a young lady, because a lot of times women, I think, get mistreated when they will come into a cigar store and there's an assumption that they're just going to buy a flavored cigar or a cigar for somebody else. So when I come into a cigar store that I haven't been into, if they greet me, that's great. And then a lot of times I'll say, hey, where's the humidor? Show me what you have, show me what's new. And then for them to be able to communicate effectively to me what they have. I mean, it's not unusual. I was at a store in Nashville a couple of years ago, and they carry a lot of boutique brands. And I carry a lot of boutique brands myself, but they had, 7, 8 brands I had no knowledge of. So I would ask them questions like, well, do you know who makes this cigar? And sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But knowing the manufacturer, so I'd look under the box. Usually it's printed in, the manufacturer and this and that, and get an idea of what I like, because I always like to smoke something I haven't smoked before. There's always that excitement. They might get disappointed, but I love to smoke a cigar from a company I've never heard of before, and see if it rocks my boat. But yeah, I think the key is they don't have to know everything. Just be friendly and inviting, and if you have questions, they're willing to answer them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the kiss of death is if they lie to you. I walked into a store, and this is kind of funny because I didn't know who I was. And they said, oh, we've got this great Opus X. These cigars were rolled in 1992. And I looked at the guy and I said, well, doesn't the 1992 mean on there that's when they first planted the seeds? No. These cigars were harvested and rolled in 1992, and we've got a great deal. And the cigars were 5 times what they should have been. And I'm like, okay, thank you. That told me all I needed to know about that particular individual. But thank God for him, because afterwards I went out and there was a bar, and the bar hand was so friendly, so engaging, that I had forgotten about it. And that made up for the situation. And that's what you hope, that if maybe if one employee misses the mark, another one will catch it. And we end up having a great time at that place.
What do you think are the most challenging aspects of running a successful cigar retail and lounge business? And why do some of these fail, or are at least on the verge of failing?
Well, I've heard people say that we have the easiest business in the world because you can make double your money. And I completely disagree with that statement. The hardest thing about running a cigar shop is a constant for me: cash flow. Just because you buy cigars doesn't mean that they're going to sell or sell right away. I mean, there are certain brands that tend to sell better than others. And the biggest challenge always is cash flow. I mean, just this week, I had to order some matches. These are real nice. I don't know if you can see them, but you don't order 5 matchbooks. Typically, you order 10, 15, 20,000. And in normal circumstances, they take 4 to 5 months to get to you. I have no idea how long this will take. You know, buying matches, $5,500. You know how many cigars you have to sell for $5,500? Or we had a situation where the heating unit in our front lounge gave out. My HVAC guy's like, well, it's 11 years old. We got to replace it. Well, the replacement's going to be $10,000 to $15,000. You have to be prepared for a rainy day. Or the unthinkable happened. The government comes in and says, you're closed indefinitely. You can't be open. Those are the kinds of things that if you're not prepared for, you're in trouble. But even if everything's perfect and normal, the decision of what to bring in, how many cigars to bring in, the sizes to bring in, that's an art form. And particularly in a place like Dallas, where a customer comes in and they want a cigar that is fairly popular, you know, maybe a Jaime Garcia Toro or a Romeo and Juliet Reserva Real Churchill or a Hemingway Signature. If you don't have that cigar, they can go right down the street and buy a box from your competitor for about the same price. So that is the hardest part, without question, is the art form of knowing what to buy, in what size, and how often, and how to judge when you need to reorder it. And that problem has been exacerbated tremendously with supply chain issues that have started in the last year. We tried to get ahead of it. We actually borrowed some money from the government under the EIDL back in the middle of 2020, and we borrowed $75,000, and we spent it all the next day on inventory because we felt that there were going to be supply chain issues. But even then, things have happened. I mean, a very popular a cigar that we carry from My Father Cigars, the Judge. It's a great cigar. We had not been having any back order issues with My Father. We placed a very, very large order at the trade show in July. The cigar that we needed did not ship until the middle of November. And credit to them, they did not ship that cigar until it was ready and it was perfect. And they deserve all the credit in the world for that. But you have to anticipate, you have to be prepared for, if you have a popular cigar, you can't just have what they used to say, 1 to show and 1 to go. You might need to have 10 boxes of that cigar or 8. And that differs if you, on the volume of your store. It also, let's say, for example, that you're a guy like Abe in Spokane and you own 12, 13 stores. That even makes it exponentially tougher. But to me, that is the key of being a great tobacconist. You have to have cigars, and you have to, because you can't worry. You can treat somebody as nice as you want to. You can humidify your cigars as nice as you want to. But if you have bare shelves, customers notice that. If customers have told me, they'll go into another store and they'll see empty shelves, and they're like, "Oh, I think they're going out of business." They'll stop going to the store. It's like a run on the bank. So that is, to me, the hardest thing is managing your cash flow, not ordering too much, because that can put you in severe trouble with your credit cards, or not ordering enough and not having product. And that is not easy. Anybody that tells you that is easy is either lying to you, or they've been doing it for 25 years and they figured it out. Because that, for me, is the hardest thing, even to this day. I'm better at it now than I was when I opened up 12 years ago, but that's very difficult.
I hear you, and especially now with the challenges in terms of supply chain and everything that's going on in the industry, it makes it even harder. I feel like in a lot of industries, again, I've seen this in hospitality myself. A lot of concepts and a lot of operators have niched down quite a bit and started to focus more on sort of a narrow approach, probably limiting their offerings, sticking to a particular theme. Do you think that would be feasible for a cigar retailer as well, to say, like, look, especially if you cannot have the biggest inventory and shelf space, like there's no tomorrow, how niche can you go, and how focused could you be on certain topics that you can convey to your customers and still give them ample choice and cater to every taste profile, but not offering like all the most popular brands that are out there and carrying the very same SKUs like everybody else there is. Do you think that's a feasible thought, or have you seen that with certain retailers? Or would you say that with a cigar lounge, there is standards you need to have, end of story?
I think it depends. I think the answer is yes, you could do it, but you better make sure you have the clientele for it. We have a store here in the Dallas area that they opened about 10 years ago, and they carry nothing but boutiques. I think recently they brought in maybe Oliva and My Father, but they brought in brands that their customers hadn't heard of, and they've done well. I know of another cigar store that they do a lot of, they work with a couple of factories that do a lot of house cigars for them, and they carry a few of the majors. Charlie Minato's joked if he were to open up a cigar store, he would have Fuente, Padron, and flavored cigars, and that might make things a little simpler. But I think you can work around it, but you have to have the customers. When we first opened, and I think Jose was here with the first year we were open, all we carried, we carried Arturo Fuente and we carried Perdomo, but other than that, everything we carried was boutique. I wanted to be boutique. I wanted cigars that I thought were great cigars we could teach people to, and we struggled for several years. And finally, I just gave up and I said, you know what? I may want to sell this small boutique brand that's great, that I love, but my customers want Macanudo, or they want Partagas, or they want Padron, or they want Rocky Patel. So I think there's a balance of, you've got to read your customers. If you have customers in an area where you can make those kinds of decisions, I've certainly seen it work. In Dallas, I think it's easier because you have 60 cigar shops to choose from. So there are cigar shops that are just purely what I'd call boutique. But for example, you just live with what you have. We have a lot of requests at our store for Davidoff white label. We are not a Davidoff appointed merchant because when we opened, there was a Davidoff store 2 miles from us, and they're still in business and they do great work. So what we've learned to do is, in a very gracious way, is we give them the name, phone number, and directions that I get to that store and say, look, if you want Davidoff white label, these guys are great. They're wonderful. In fact, we'll call, just ask for Bob, the owner. He's a great guy. Now, we do have some other cigars we can show you. And what I have found that is, more often than not, people will stay and say, okay, well, show me what else you have. And understand the fact that maybe you're not going to get all of that client's business. But I think the worst thing you can do is when someone asks for a brand and say, well, I don't have that brand, but this brand here tastes just like it. I think that's a bad rabbit hole to go down. It's okay to be honest and say, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't carry Davidoff white label. Or if you don't carry a particular brand, that's okay. You can't carry everything. Now, I do get a lot of questions for certain brands that are only available on the internet. And I have a very ready answer for that. And I said, look, this brand I don't carry. They're good cigars, but you can buy them cheaper online. And I'm not going to sell you a cigar for $8. You can go buy online for $4. I said, I do have some other offerings from that company, and I can show them to you, and I let them decide. But I think the short answer to your question is, yes, you can survive if you build a boutique atmosphere. But let's say you're the only cigar retailer in Antwerp. You probably need to carry some basics. I would imagine if you're there, you probably need to carry Cohiba. You probably need to carry Partagas. Probably need to carry, the key Cuban brands, maybe a few others. But I also understand there's a cigar retailer is in the Netherlands that they carry nothing but Nicaraguan cigars. So I think you can do it. And I think you benefit yourself by having multiple choices, particularly brands that are recognizable. So the motto that we've chosen with our clients, because we do 90% of our businesses with 8 brands, but we carry probably 80 brands. And we say, look, the cigar, if you see a cigar in our humidor, it's either one you've heard of, or if you haven't heard of it, there's a reason why you should be smoking it. And then you've got to have your employees trained to tell them why that cigar is worth trying. Like, we just recently brought in a brand called Jake Wyatt that's pretty small. I know one of the owners of Jake Wyatt, and I had other board members of the PCA who are retailers tell me that they were really happy with the cigars. So you present those cigars to people. But if that person wants a particular brand, they want a Rocky Patelli, they want an Oliva, or they want an Illusion, or what have you, then you either have to have it, or if you don't have it, you have to have the integrity to say, well, I don't have that cigar, but this cigar shop does. And, don't try to hide it from them, because, that's a lack of integrity. That's just not fair to people. That's just my opinion. But yeah, so convoluted, but I guess the short answer is you probably do need to carry some major brands, but there are cigar stores that have been able to beat that. But I think they beat it because they're in areas where there's other competition that can absorb that. Because if a guy is living in a place, or a lady's living in a place, and there's one cigar shop and they don't sell a particular brand, they'll find it, but they may not find it from you.
Brian, you had a question. You raised your hand. Fire away, buddy.
Hello. Sorry. Right just as I raised my hand, the gardeners came by. So if you hear a lawnmower, first of all, can I get a deal on a box? Sent to LA? No, I'm kidding. Just putting that out there, because that one customer got a deal on a box. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I think we have a lot in common. I love that you mentioned Montana as a place that probably doesn't have so many shops. I actually grew up there. Strangely enough, we have head shops, which is weird because weed is still illegal there. So you can buy the pipe, but not the weed. Yeah, there's not really cigar shops in Montana. I think the best kind of atmosphere for learning about that is your girlfriend's dad. He's going to introduce you to a Romeo and Julieta, and then that's the end of the conversation. Also, I love that you mentioned Cheers. That's my favorite sitcom of all time. So a couple of questions, I guess. One, you talk about integrity a lot. It's one of my favorite words. And I'm wondering, as a previous lawyer, how it's possible that you've held on to a sense of integrity and morality. And also, my other question is, someone comes in to the shop. How long? I'm a chess player. It won't take me long to meet another person before I can assess what they know. And so adults lie about all kinds of things, surprisingly, all the time. And so people are going to pretend like they know some information about chess when they don't, but I'll find out. It doesn't take long. So how long does it take you if somebody comes in? Are they someone who doesn't know, but they're pretending to know? And sort of how do you deal with that situation? Because they're probably not honest. They're probably not going to say, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Maybe. So yeah, fire away.
Well, to answer your first question is, ironically, most lawyers that I worked with had integrity, but those without the people making $1 million a year. But that can be quite a grind. I don't wish that upon anyone. I'd say the biggest thing is when a customer comes in and they don't know what they're talking about, I do my absolute best not to embarrass them. Every once in a while, if I'm in a particular kind of a mood and I feel like they can handle it, they've got a tough skin, and that's tough to read very quickly, is sometimes it's okay to make a little fun at a customer. But I try not to, particularly if I don't have a read on them. You work with them where they're at. Like I had a customer who he was insistent that, and Jose will get a crack out of this. I think I mentioned this on Meet the Professor. He was insistent that Ashton cigars were made in Cuba and that Arturo Fuente cigars were terrible. And I mentioned him, I said, well, Arturo Fuente makes a lot of Ashton cigars. And he's like, no, you're wrong. I've been to the Ashton factory in Cuba. And I said, okay. That's literally all I said is, okay. And then I showed him the Ashton cigars, he bought them, and he's since come back many, many times, and he's become a good customer. And I think if I had completely embarrassed him and proved that I was right, I would have won the argument, but lost the war. But now he comes in once a week and he buys his Ashtons and he's happy and he's always glad to see me. And, nobody likes to be embarrassed or made to feel stupid. We've all been in situations where we realize in a conversation that what we're saying is incorrect, that we've made a boo-boo, we remembered something wrong, or we just flat out didn't know. And that's embarrassing for everybody. So the last thing you want to do is publicly humiliate somebody. If they don't know, they don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't just sit down and play a game and win the game to sort of prove your point, but better to say okay and smile and nod. So with your vast wealth of knowledge, then how long does it take for you to read a person based on like,
As far as what they might want to smoke, or read them as a human being?
well, well, that's a whole other conversation, I think.
I've been married for
No.
30 years. I haven't quite figured my wife out yet, so I don't know.
No, like just their cigar knowledge. If they're not being straightforward about it.
Pretty quickly. But I would say that I'm not the smartest guy out there, but I'm probably more educated than the average cigar retailer, in the fact that I travel all over the country. I go to other people's stores all the time. I learned, I ask questions all the time, and I learn from other retailers. You know, just because I'm in the same business doesn't mean that I'm smarter than them. There are things that other retailers know that I just don't have a clue, and you can always learn. But that being said, is you can figure out pretty quickly if somebody comes in and they're telling you a certain thing, it still reveals knowledge about them. I mean, one of the toughest questions in the world to ask, which is real easy, is you just say, what have you smoked in the past that you liked? And a lot of times they'll give you an answer, or all of a sudden they'll pull out the list from Cigar Aficionado, and that's what they want to smoke. And then you work with them where they're at. You try to find a commonality with them. You know, if the guy says, you know, hey, I want to smoke, like we had a guy come in, he wanted to smoke the Pledge from Ernesto Carrillo, fantastic cigar. We were back ordered at the time. And I said, well, you know, Ernesto Carrillo makes these particular cigars are going to be a little different. So for example, he wanted the Pledge, and I said, we don't have the Pledge. And he's like, well, I want a cigar that tastes like that. I said, well, there's no cigar that's going to taste like that. I said, you have similar types. And I said, this is similar. This is rough justice, but I said, similar types of wrapper on a Black Diamond. You have similar types of wrapper on a Partagas Black. I said, what is it about that cigar you like? Then I realized that he really wanted it. He really wanted the spice and this and that. So I'm like, okay, how about this particular cigar from AJ Fernandez? And he's like, okay, I'll get 5. And I'm like, are you going to hang out here and smoke? And he goes, yeah. I said, buy 1. I said, if you like it, buy the other 4. And he loved it and ended up buying the box. But the last thing I want to do is saddle a guy. We all know that feeling when you open up your humidor and there's a cigar that you've got 4 or 5 of it. You don't like that cigar. You don't ever want to smoke that cigar again. Not because it's a bad cigar necessarily, it just doesn't get your palate. So you just do your best. And, you know, sometimes you're going to miss. I would say with most customers, I'm right about 90% of the time, but I've got a couple customers who've been here for a long time. I'm wrong 80% of the time. In fact, sometimes I'll recommend to the guy and say, look, I said, this cigar I didn't like at all. I thought it was terrible. And I said, I've been so wrong with you. Why don't you try it? He's like, oh my God, I love it. Because, you know, he has a different flavor profile. You know, there's different things that he likes. And that's the challenge is when people come in, particularly if they're repeat customers, you can do a better job. But first time, it's better to say, well, I think this might fit. Don't be definitive, because if you definitely sell him an opinion, and even if you're right about the cigar, it may not be right for his palate or her palate. You just don't know. And it's okay to say you don't know. In fact, I've trained my employees to say that. I get calls all the time. I'll be at home. My employee will be like, yeah, so-and-so came in. He said this and this. And he asked about this particular cigar. And he goes, Jay, he goes, I honestly don't remember who makes this cigar or how it's different or similar. And then I help out my employee. But then there are times that I'll say, hey, can you put the guy on the phone? And be like, look, I said, I can't answer your question either. Give me more information. And it's okay to say that you don't know. A customer will appreciate that rather than just making something up. We've all experienced that. And you'd rather have somebody just say, you know what? I don't know what to tell you. And then they figure it out. I mean, you're buying a cigar. You're not buying a ticket to go on the Mars rover. You know, it's not that big of a deal.
Great. Thank you for the answers. Cheers.
Thank you.
I'm very glad and happy to see our dear friend and brother, Cy Sweeney, with us again. Cy,
Hi.
good to see you, my man. You had a couple of questions for Mr. Davis.
Hi Jay, nice to see you on, and hope you're having a good day. Yeah, just a couple of questions here. That just because of the current stable uphill sales going on at the moment for the last couple of years, how are you dealing with some cigars coming onto the market that are not quite ready? Unfortunately, this is happening at the moment to some retailers that I've spoken with. What is your view on this? The second question is, with all the extra brands on the market, and so many people trying to do these top 25 lists coming out at the moment. Does this influence you on what you stock? And is it a gamble to rely on these so-called top-rated cigars selling on your premises, or a gamble for you to stock them?
Well, the first question is, you just have to be honest. I am not afraid to tell a client, yeah, I'll tell him that cigar is a piece of shit. And then he'll ask, well, why'd you buy it? I'm like, well, I was told X, Y, and Z. I don't really recommend the cigar. And I said, now, if you like this and this and this in the cigar, maybe you'll like it. But there are certain cigars I've just taken off the shelves and I'm like, it's a cost of doing business. I'm just not going to sell it, or I'll throw it in the half price bin and say, look, you know, you're going to take this as it is. There are some cigars that recently have not been smoking right. And if a customer asks me, I'll be like, bro, this cigar is not smoking right now. I don't care, because my integrity is more important than that one particular sale. And I'm just not, you know, sometimes you buy cigars and you get stuck with them. They're terrible. There's a particular cigar, for example, I was raving to my employees that I loved it at the trade show. And what arrived, it was terrible. So I'm just like, look, I said, if somebody wants to buy it, let them buy it. But I said, I wouldn't push it. On the flip side, we did have a cigar come in recently that I did not like as much as I did at the trade show. And I've told customers, I said, well, I just didn't like it as much, but I said, you know, go ahead and try one. And I have been voted down. I mean, a guy came in the other day, he's like, yeah, you mentioned to me that you didn't like this cigar. And he goes, but I really liked it. And I said, well, I said, you're not alone. I said, I've had about 40 people I've told it to, and they all loved it. So I'm just going to tell you up front, I don't care for the cigar, and this is why. But I said, I'm outvoted 40-1. So maybe buy one cigar, you might really like it. But I'm not going to tell somebody I like a cigar if I don't like it. Life's too short for that. What was your second question?
My second question was, with all the extra brands on the market and so many people doing these top 25 lists, does it influence you on what you stock? And is it a gamble to rely on these so-called top-rated cigars selling on your premises, or even stocking a lot of them?
Yeah, there was a time when I would order a lot of those cigars. In my opinion, you need to carry the number one cigar of the year, particularly if it's not a Cuban cigar. There are people that still come in, and I'm sorry, with all due respect to, I have a lot of friends in the media. The only list that matters is Cigar Aficionado in the United States. Cigar Journal can give a cigar number one, Cigar Snob, other companies, great. But the only one, unfortunately, that still moves the needle is Cigar Aficionado. And that's a fact of life. And, you know, William Cooper can call me up and yell at me, and other people yell at me, but that's as a retailer, I want to see what the top three cigars are. And I will typically carry those a little heavy. But I have had situations where a cigar wins number one and it doesn't sell. But then you always have the cigars like the Andalusian Bull that, you know, still wasn't 5-6 years later, we still can't keep the cigar on the shelf. But, you know, if a cigar is on a particular list that may or may not influence anything, but as far as me, what I'm going to buy, if it's in the top 1, 2, or 3 of Cigar Aficionado, I'm going to order it and order it heavy. But I take a wait and see attitude with the other lists. You know, even a cigar that, you know, wins the half wheel consensus, which I think is a great list, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to move the needle. Now that doesn't mean I'm not going to order the cigar, but I'm not going to order 30 boxes of that cigar. I might order 3 or 4 boxes of that cigar. Or if like, you know, a company like Cigar Snob or Coop comes out and says, this is number one. Yeah, I'm going to order maybe a box or 2 here and there, but I don't really go heavy unless it's Cigar Aficionado, because for whatever reason, that is still the voice that most customers listen to. And that's what we have to respond to. I may not necessarily agree with what the number one cigar is, and I may agree with the number one that's on Cigar Dojo's list, for example, or Cigar Journal's list. And I will tell people that. I'll say, hey, this cigar was, and I've done this many times, this cigar was number one from Cigar Journal last year. It's a fantastic cigar. I talk about how their tasting panel works, and I'm like, this is a cigar you should try. But people aren't coming in saying, I want 3 boxes of this. The Cigar Aficionado is the only one that moves the needle in the United States, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Cigar Journal is more world, you know, for the rest of the world as well, you know.
I mean, I read Cigar Journal for me, you know, if I want to try a new cigar. because a lot of times they introduce the cigars to me that I haven't heard of, or maybe one that I hadn't thought about that much, and I'll go back and revisit it because I smoke everything that's in my humidor, whether it's a flavored cigar or it's an 80 by 8, and I got a 9 by 90 coming. If it's in my humidor, I've smoked it. And my employees think that I'm nuts, but I'm like, how can you describe to somebody what a particular cigar tastes like? Like a customer come in and say, I want a recommendation on a vanilla cigar. I've smoked all 4 vanilla cigars we have. I may not like them necessarily, but I know enough to be able to communicate. Well, this one is sort of like this is sort of like that. And it'll help me with the customer. And I think you have a responsibility to do that. But yeah, lists are tricky, but I still see people coming in. I saw someone come in 2 weeks ago and on their phone, they have the Cigar Aficionado top 25 from last year. And they wanted those cigars by that company, that size. And there was no broker in that. So you have it or you don't.
Okay. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate the answers.
Now, no other media is going to want to talk to me.
I'll say I believe you probably wanted to add something to this.
Well, I think that Jay is correct. We've had this conversation, especially in the States, and Cooper's been one of the ones that have said it. Every year when the countdown comes down, we all have our list and all that, but at the end of the day, for many years it was the top 25, then it went down to the top 10, then it went down to the top 5. And still the top 5 makes it, but really, like Jay says, it's the top 3. But asking another question, Jay, we've seen this year probably we're going to break record of the 418 million cigars of the boom of 1997. So my question to you is this: do you think for the first quarter of next year, or by the show in Dortmund next year, will define if this madness and this consumption and all this craziness that's going on will continue? Or, as many people have said, have we hit the peak?
It's different to answer that question because I don't have a PhD in macroeconomics, but my opinion is that most of the consumption is people that used to smoke 1 or 2 cigars a day are smoking, 1 or 2 a week, or smoking 1 or 2 a day now because they're at home. But I have seen, and I'm surprised that other retailers haven't pointed this out, but I have seen a lot of people who are brand new to smoking. They got introduced to it by someone else during COVID, or I've seen a lot of people that left after the last boom. They're like, I haven't smoked a cigar in 20 years. They'd gotten so bad, but I keep hearing how they're good, and I've been home now. So I think we are going to keep a lot of these new smokers. And I think some people are going to keep their consumption up. But I'm starting to hear stories more and more about how, like, I went and saw my State Farm agent yesterday. I was reviewing my policies, and she was talking about how people are now starting to go back to the offices in the next 6 months. And I think, at least in the United States, I can't speak for Europe and other places, I don't really know, but I think as more people start to go back into the office and there's less opportunities to smoke, I do think that this boon will soften. But I think that we have, just my opinion, I think that we're going to see huge cigar consumption for the next 2 to 3 quarters. And I think it will eventually go down. But I do think we've added a lot of cigar smokers. And that's why one of the things that I keep hearing on shows that really concerns me, and then I've seen it more and more, is there are a lot of companies that are starting to cut corners. I'm not going to name names, but there are a lot of companies where I'm very disappointed that they have cut corners and their cigars are not the same. And I'm just not ordering from those people. And there are companies out there which, I'm going to give credit to: Arturo Fuente, La Flor de Dominicana, My Father Cigars. Those are Rocky Patel, who I know sometimes we give Rocky a hard time about his cigars, but I have seen actually increases in quality from those companies. And I'm real proud. I've nothing I've seen come out of Ernesto Carrillo's factory, the same thing, just all great quality. So there are a lot of companies really trying to do it right and trying to make sure the cigars are right and they're ready. And I think that those companies deserve credit, but there are companies that are dragging their feet. For example, we have our annual trade show where we buy product in July. typically, unless it's for the holiday season, you get those cigars by October at the latest. I still have cigars that haven't shipped. I got a call from a company last night and they said, do you really want the cigars now? And I'm like, man, you're burying me for Christmas. And they're like, well, we have another container coming in February and we're oversold. I'm like, okay, fine, send it to me in February. So I'm glad to hear that a lot of companies, I think, are much more concerned about keeping quality than the ones that aren't. But there has been some slippage. But the quick answer to your question, in my opinion, I think 2 to 3 more quarters of huge cigar consumption, and then I think it's gonna go back down. I don't think it's gonna go back down to the levels where it was in 2019. I don't remember. 2019 for me was just a horrible year as far as sales and cigar consumption, because I do think we've added some cigar smokers, and I think we're going to keep them as long as they don't get their hands on the bad cigars. So I guess the follow up to that is I would really be worried about cigar consumption fourth quarter next year, Christmas.
Great points.
Thanks, Jay.
Hey, when we spoke about the way that certain brands approach you when a sales rep comes in, for example, and your process and methodology of choosing which brands to stock. Now, looking at the interaction between the manufacturer and the retailer in a little more detail, do you think that brands should be more in charge or have a clearer vision of how they want their product to be displayed, handled, or presented to the end consumer? Is that something that the retail community would appreciate? Or do you think it's truly up to the retailer itself to create that experience at the point of sale?
I would say that most companies don't really take that mantle. The one exception would be JC Newman and Arturo Fuente. They are very clear sometimes. They'll say, look, we're going to sell these cigars and we're going to sell this humidor. We want them sold together. Or we don't really want all of this to go to one company. I do get feedback like that from them. And then there are other companies like Ashton or Rocky Patel that will come out and say, when they have their rep there, they say, well, we really like to, or Perdomo does this a lot. We really like to see our cigars displayed like this. Is it okay if I make some suggestions? Can we go sort of through a planogram? I think Nick Perdomo's done a very good job with that. And, you know, some cigar retailers will rebuff at that. I know sometimes I can get that way where it's like, hey, it's my business. But, you know, I think that the companies should take a more hands-on approach and saying, this is our brand, because they go through all this work of getting the tobacco grown, making the cigars, aging them, putting them in boxes, putting barcodes on them, and they ship. And then a customer comes in and all that effort's been wasted because it's not properly displayed. Mm-hmm. And it could be little things. I mean, I remember going through the box factory earlier this year with Ciro Caselli, the president of Arturo Fuente. And after going through the box factory, and I've been to the box factory before, I came back and I said, you know what, we need to make sure that we're not tearing the tops off these boxes. Even though we're going to lose 5 or 6 facings, I just don't feel right about it. When I saw all the effort they're putting in to have the way that the box presentation should be, we need to do a better job. And that came, you know, it wasn't like it was a heavy-handed thing. It was just like, hey, you know, we put a lot into these boxes and there's shortages on wood and different things like that. So I actually would like to see more of that. I love it when a cigar company says to me, hey, this is our baby. Can you present it in this way? Or if a representative comes in and says, you know, I don't really like where you have it here, and this is why I don't like it. Have you thought about maybe moving this popular brand that people are going to buy no matter where it is, maybe moving it over here and having our brand here? That will help us. And I would like to see more input from companies, because typically they have a perspective I don't have. I mean, I would imagine Jose probably sees more shops in 2 weeks when he's traveling than I see in an entire year. And when you're out there on the road and you see 50, 100, 150, 200 shops, you have an idea of what's working and what's not working. And they walk into your store and you don't have it properly merchandised. You know, I would love to hear that input. It helps me. You know, you can't figure out, because a lot of times you're just in your store. You can't figure out, hey, this is working in Los Angeles. This is working in Seattle. This is working in Miami. And I'm not doing that. And if someone doesn't tell me, hey, this works, then how am I going to improve the experience for my customers? So I would like to see customers, I'd like to see companies provide more input without it being like a law. I think that's a good thing.
Mhm. Would you say that the educational component, both for the retailer and the end consumer, ties into that as well? And do you see that primarily as a responsibility of the manufacturers, or is it within the retail community itself, or probably even PCA? We see it probably displayed behind you, and you're a member of the board with PCA. How do you think about that, and how can we bring more of the so valuable and important education to the retail community?
Like I said, I think it's having open ears. I'll give you an example. We decided to do an event with Luciano, who's one of my favorite people in the industry. I've met Luciano several times, but he's never been to my store. And we've been trying to build our Crown Heads display and Ace Prime display. And he came in and we did a meet and greet. And he just asked if we could go in the humidor for a few minutes. So I said, sure. And he didn't dress me down or anything. He just said, hey, I see where you have these cigars here and these cigars here. Have you thought about having it maybe this way or that way? And I thought I didn't even realize sometimes, particularly lately, we're so busy. Sales are up dramatically this year. You get cigars in and you literally just want to find a place to put them on the shelf. You have to take things off, or you have to maybe put the Toros and the Robustos in a shared box. And then you kind of just don't think about it. And then a macro level, like Luciano comes in and I've got Pichardo cigars here and Crown Heads here and some other ones here. And they're in the same place, but they're not harmoniously displayed. And just by him just having a 30,000 foot view, he was able to say, well, I think maybe if you did this, this, and this, it would help. And we followed his advice, and it's improved sales for his brand. And if he had not had the courage to take me aside and say, hey, maybe you can do better, I think it would have hurt his company and hurt us. And I think a lot of times you get caught up in the micro, whatever it is that you're doing in life, that you're looking at it all the time. You're constantly staring at it. What are you going to do? And I think that helps. So I would like to see companies provide more of that. I'm not sure how much PCA can help with that, other than, they can get behind a brand here or there. But that's part of the reason that I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of different manufacturers talk and get an understanding of their story. But yeah, I think when the manufacturer goes through a process, like I think Crux just went through a long process of redesigning their boxes with their cigars. And I spent time on the phone with the owner of Crux, and I said, Jeff, what was your thinking? He would tell me, this is why we did what we did. So it looks like this on your shelf. Try this or try that. And also just go two ways too. We're not afraid to, if we get cigars from a company, and this has happened many times, you get great cigars from a company and the box just doesn't fit on the shelf, or when it gets on that angle, it just doesn't, they fall off. Because the US market's very different from what my perception of the European market. My perception of when I go to Europe or I go to South America, it's primarily a decision of there's a few different individual cigars you can buy, but most of the cigars you want to buy by the box. It's very different in the United States, where almost everything is displayed. Although you don't want to encourage box purchases, there's a lot more things that have to be displayed. It's very different. I was at the Partagas store in Cuba, and they had maybe 10 or 15 things you could buy individually. Everything else you had to buy by the box. Well, imagine if they had to display individual cigars for every single Vitola that they had, it would be a different retail experience. So I think it definitely helps to get input from the manufacturers, but also it has to go the other way too. Sometimes a company will make a great cigar, and I don't know what they were thinking when they made the box. Like you open the box and the back just falls right off, and it's like, what just happened here? And they didn't think about how is it going to fit on the in retail shelf. And I think I have a responsibility in a respectful manner to call the manufacturer and say, hey, have you thought about this or that, because this just isn't working. And I think that having things that are shelf friendly is important. It's difficult sometimes to deal with that, but I think yes, communication is important. I think it needs to go both ways, and I don't have a problem in the world if the manufacturers put all the sweat, labor, and tears into giving you a premium cigar, and to say, hey, have you thought about displaying it this way? Because otherwise you destroy all their hard work.
You just sort of inspired me for a question that I usually ask the manufacturers, but I'd be very curious to hear your opinion. Um, Sometimes it feels like there's certain brands that have a very clear and concise portfolio with a very distinct theme or approach behind it, and then there's other brands where you feel like there's 275 different SKUs, and it's sort of trying to please everybody, and it's all over the place. Do you see yourself following more of the sort of narrow approach where you feel like this is what I'm going to be carrying of a brand? This is the most clear and concise expression of that particular manufacturer? Or which category would you say do you fall into?
I think it depends. I would say that for most brands, I want to carry 3 sizes. There are some brands, like Don Carlos's example, we carry every size. But I think that, to be fair to the manufacturer, if they have a cigar line that's got 8 sizes and another cigar line that's got 5 sizes, and you have just two boxes there, that's not going to really impress somebody to think about that brand and to want to buy it. I do think that there are definitely 2 types of companies when it comes to making cigars. And there's what I call longer vision companies. And the companies I would put in that category be like Padron or Fuente, or I know Steve Saka spoke a lot about this, or Perdomo, that there's thoughts that, okay, when we make this brand, we're not just trying to sell this cigar at the trade show. We're making this brand with the idea that it's going to be on the retail shelves for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And that we don't have to release something every single year. But when we do release something, it's got to make sure that we haven't just released something else, or else it cannibalizes our sales. Or if you do have a lot of things on your sheet, Davidoff does a very good job, for example, saying, okay, we've got too many SKUs. We need to just cease making these for a while so that we don't overwhelm our retailers with too many choices. I think that that's got to be a very challenging thing for manufacturers. How do we maintain and grow our portfolio, but you don't grow it too fastly? Because if you're always coming out with something new, I know Skip Martin's done this as well, where he doesn't release something new every year. And the idea is that if you're going to, when he came out with Baca, his Cameroon cigar, he didn't want to have it come out so quickly that it would hurt his Connecticut broadleaf line or his Arequipaca line, that there will be a place where it fits in their overall portfolio. Because at the end of the day, if you're a manufacturer, you want to have as much shelf space as possible. And if you're constantly making, I'm going to make brand X, and then next year I'm going to make brand X in the Connecticut wrapper, and the next year I'm going to make brand X in the Sungrown wrapper, and the next year I'm going to make brand X in the San Andreas wrapper, you just get lost. And eventually that company is just replacing facings with this new cigar that they had from the old cigar 3 or 4 years ago. Now, if you do want to revisit things, I think Pete Johnson's done a great job of, he has a large portfolio, but he might bring something back, and it might just be a targeted release for, maybe he'll bring out a few boxes and it's going to be limited for that year, or he'll retire a brand for a period of years and then he'll bring it back. Because yes, you do need to keep things fresh, but you don't want to have so many redundant SKUs that it just becomes the customer gets lost. And I think that's a challenge. I like, Steve Saka described it best, and I know we'll go to Steve's head, but we did meetings for the trade show in 2020 through video conference like this. And I like the fact that he talked about every single brand that he had. And his thinking was, well, I see this brand being this place in the marketplace in 5 years, this place in the marketplace in 10 years, this place in the marketplace in 15. And this is how brand A fits with brand B, fits with brand C, fits with brand D in my portfolio. And yeah, I'll do a couple, limited edition type things. But as far as actual lines, just thinking it through. And I think that is a more effective strategy than just constantly just throwing 5, 6 new brands at the trade show, and then the next year 2 or 3 of them are already in the discount bin. You haven't really accomplished anything.
Yeah. Excellent comment. Thank you. So I had another quick question.
Just a quick question there, Jay. When you're making room for, say if you've cigars there, say a good cigar or a very good cigar, but it's not selling in your shop, and you have to take space off and bring in a new, a different brand. Have you ever had a hard time from any manufacturers or reps asking the reason why you're taking off this cigar? Have you ever had, like, a real pain in the ass, to put it mildly, about, over why you're taking off certain cigars
Oh
from the
yeah.
reps or the manufacturers?
People get their feelings hurt, particularly reps. The two most uncomfortable situations, in my opinion, in the industry are writing a lot of business with somebody that you don't like to work with, but you need to because their cigars are selling. And the worst is when you have somebody who you can consider a genuine friend, but their cigars just aren't moving and they're not going to move in your humidor, and having to tell them no. Those are always difficult emotional decisions, but a lot of times reps will get upset about that. And you'll say, look, you have to be hardcore about it and say, it just doesn't sell. It doesn't mean it's a bad cigar. It just, given the macro level of the palates and the people that come into our store, this cigar is just not selling. And ultimately, if a cigar line is on the shelf, it's got to pay its rent. Now, maybe it might take a couple years of working with that cigar line and doing your best to present it to people, but people buy what they buy. And, like Rocky Patel Edge is a cigar that always sells. You can be as highfalutin as you want to be about it, saying, oh, it's this cigar, that. They're consistent cigars and people buy them. Perdomo Champagne Anniversaries like that. It sells. Now, I guess it has a different name in Europe, but those cigars just sell and sell and sell and sell. And at the end of the day, you need to sell cigars so that you can pay your employees, you can pay your rent, you can pay your taxes, you pay your health insurance, which is outrageously expensive. We have a 401k for our employees. It does nothing for me to have a great cigar on the shelf that doesn't sell.
Doesn't sell, yeah.
Because I have bills to pay. I have a family to feed. And
no matter who makes it, yeah.
No matter who makes it, there are cigars from every manufacturer I've had to take off the shelf, and it's always an uncomfortable conversation. But the best thing is just to be honest about it.
Yeah.
And say, look, for whatever reason, this was a miss. I'm not sure why, or if you do know why, you tell them, hey, I think this is a great cigar, but you're charging $18, and maybe it should be a $12 cigar. Or, hey, it's a great cigar, but sometimes the draw's wrong and you guys have to work on that. But sometimes you can't figure it out. It's a great cigar. It sells great at the shop 3 miles down the road and great at the shop 5 miles down the road, but it doesn't sell at your store. Well, you've got to make the decision of just saying, I don't have it. And then unfortunately the customer will come in and say, hey, do you have this particular brand? And say, no, we don't have this particular brand. It just didn't sell very well for us. If you'd like, I can order a box for you and we can have it set aside for you. And whenever you come in and get a few. But honestly, if you want to buy this cigar, I'll name the cigar shops. You can go to this particular cigar shop or this particular cigar shop and you can order it. And just be honest with people. The worst thing you can do, and there's always this temptation because you're embarrassed, right? Oh, well, we carry that cigar, but it's back ordered and it's coming back in. Don't lie to a customer because they'll eventually figure it out. And then you've lost your integrity.
Yeah, honesty is the best policy at the end of the day.
Certain cigars, it's inexplicable to me. Cigars that I feel great about. I love the people I'm working with. They're well displayed. They just don't sell, and you can't figure out why it is. It just doesn't. It's just not working for some reason.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Appreciate that.
Jay, before we wrap things off, I would love to hear a little bit of your perspective on your role with the Premium Cigar Association, you being part of the board now. I don't want to go into all the regulatory issues that we have discussed and most people are aware of, but when it comes to the organization as a whole and your contribution to that, what do you think the PCA could and should do better moving forward in order to stay relevant for the premium cigar industry? And where do you see your value and your contribution with your time serving on the board?
Well, I think the premium cigar industry's, the PCA's mandate, whether we like it or not, has changed over the last number of years. We used to be primarily about having a trade show and introducing people to different cigar brands. But I think that the second mandate has risen up, dealing with regulatory fights and trying to figure out how to best pick those fights. You have issues that are on the federal government side of the United States. You also have issues in all 50 states, as well as various different municipalities. And that's a challenge, trying to figure out the best way to work with local people and to work with people in a way that doesn't spend all your money. That is a challenge that we face. How do we work with the CRA? How do we work with the cigar rights of the world as that develops more and more, and to figure out the best way to spend the money that you have? I think that is something that we're doing a decent job at. I think we can do a better job, but I think with the leadership of the board and Scott Pierce, I think we're doing a good job on that, figuring out where we can donate money and spend money, and where we can work with others and maybe have them spend most of the money on these fights. So, for example, recently Michigan, there was a tax cap passed, and the way PCA did that is they gave some money for some local lobbyists to work on it, and working with the state association. And although Michigan doesn't have a single member of the PCA, none of the retail shops in Michigan are PCA, which is weird. Working with them in a way that we can work behind the scenes, I think it's more effective than you having to spend every dollar. The second issue is, what do we do about the trade show? And I think there's a lot of trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. You've got people that are on one side of the equation that the trade show is fine. You have other people like me. It's like, well, maybe there's virtual options, and maybe we do some sort of celebration for the cigar industry, and figure out a way that we can become a relevant cog for manufacturers and for retailers to help our industry move into the 21st century. And I think that's been a challenge. The trade show, as all trade shows, are not in the same space where they were 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And figuring out, how to best do a trade show, also dealing with the regulations. It's very difficult to put on a trade show and have places for people to go at night after the trade show where they can smoke. And Las Vegas has sort of been that place. And I think that there's going to have to be some hard thinking. And we've had a lot of discussions about that. So I think the future's uncertain on the trade show end, but some things definitely need to change. And I think that there are arguments within the industry as to how to do that. And there's arguments on the board of how to do that. And we're trying to figure it out. And it's tough for me because I'm new on the board. Most of the power on the board is concentrated in the executive committee, which are 5 individuals who they spend a lot more time on this, but they're also volunteers. And then there's the rest of the board, the other 10 of us. And we have a lot of balls in the air, and we don't have a lot of money to work with. So I don't know what the answers are, but I think everyone would agree that a lot of things need to change about where we do our trade shows, how we do our trade shows, how we can get manufacturers to be involved and protect retailers and educate them. At the same time, dealing with the second issue that's become so important of dealing with the federal government, that, it's not lost on me what happened with plain packaging. Look at Australia, look at Canada. The thing that happened with Minister of Cigars, and I mentioned that at the board meeting. I said, it's very easy to change the definition of advertising so that a cigar store cannot say, hey, this cigar is now in, or that we could smoke a cigar on a podcast like this. So those are some things that we've got to figure out. And what I would encourage every retailer and manufacturer, and this includes their employees, is get involved, run for the board. If you don't get on the board, run and try to be involved in committees and let your voice be heard, because they are willing to hear. But I think that the PCA, we need some direction. We've got to figure some things out. The CRA, they also need to figure some things out, but we're doing the best we can. So I'm glad that I ran for the board. I'm glad that I'm a part of it, but it's a process. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different constituencies that you have to address. But I think it's a big challenge to try to take care of those dual directives that the PCA has going forward.
Amen to that, and bravo for the work that you're doing there, and our very best to all the endeavors, all the balls that are in the air. I am pretty sure that the trade show is probably going to look differently in 22, and I'm excited and curious to see which direction it'll be headed. But as you rightfully mentioned, whether it's on the manufacturers, retailers, or even end consumer side, I think we all need to stand up and we all need to raise our voices to continue the fight for our right to enjoy premium cigars, and for all of us as an industry and as an ecosystem to stand together and try to make it better every single day, even with little things and little components, and hopefully a small endeavor like our show, like Light 'em Up, can be an opportunity to provide service to that, to bring people closer, and to make sure that we as a family are united, and that we all serve a greater purpose, if that makes
I
sense.
agree. I think apathy is the big killer. It's easy to get apathetic and just let someone else worry about it. That we need more people involved. And because you may have an idea that I don't have, Cy might have an idea that Jose doesn't have. We need more people involved and more people to have input in order to figure this out, because we're definitely in a changing landscape and we're not popular. Governments do not want to encourage people to smoke cigars.
True to that. Next week, we will have Mickey Pegg from All Saints Cigars joining us. I hope all of you, most of you, will be with us again next Wednesday. But for today, J.R. Davis from Blue Smoke of Dallas, I have to say it was a most excellent interview and conversation, and I so much appreciate and I thoroughly enjoyed all the perspectives that you shared as one of the most accomplished cigar retailers in the United States, as a serving member of the board at the PCA. And I can only personally thank you for everything that you do and the wonderful contribution that you make to the premium cigar industry. It has to be heard, and it is most certainly greatly appreciated. So many, many thanks. And in particular for today, thank you for being our guest at the Light 'em Up Lounge.
Thank you very much.